Welcome back to another episode of the Rock Fantasy Files on the Rock Fantasy YouTube channel. Tonight, we're going to do something we have never done on this channel. We're going to talk Southern rock. I don't think we've ever talked Southern rock. Maybe someone's going to say you did on one episode, maybe in a best of a year or something. But welcome back to another episode. And tonight, we're going to turn our focus to Jacksonville, Florida's Southern rock legends. Lynyrd Skynyrd. I got the hat on. And I've asked tonight's panels to list their top 3 LPs and what they like about them, maybe a couple of things they didn't like about them, and maybe we'll have a little chat. And in the room tonight, we've got Myles Bergeron. We got some people representing the South from Louisiana. We got Tony Dio from North Carolina. We got Sasquatch Barth from the Mighty Aggression, thrash metal up in Vancouver, Canada. We got Matt Horun, first time ever on the channel. He's from upstate New York, up in the Adirondacks. We got Ove Rendum from Norway, who's staying up all night to talk Southern rock with us. And we got Mr. Peter Pardo from, of course, Sea of Tranquility and the Hudson Valley Squares. So this year marks the 45th anniversary, unfortunately, of October 20th, 1977, the horrific plane crash that killed Ronnie Van Zant, Steve Gaines, Cassie Gaines, and seriously injured the rest of the band, nipping pretty much all the momentum that they had built up in the 70s. And God knows what would have happened with this band if it kept going. Of course, we all know they reunited in 1987 with Ronnie's brother, Johnny Van Zant, as the lead vocalist. They continue to tour with co-founder Gary Rosington, which I found out he's not always on the tour, but he was back in Tampa over the weekend. Of course, fellow guitarist and Native American Ricky of heritage, Ricky Medlock, who wrote and recorded with the band from 71 to 72, is on the road and has been, of course, since 87. Many are familiar, of course, with his Native American band, Blackfoot. They continue to tour in 2022 and are currently on the Big Wheels Keep On Turning North American tour, keeping, the band's memory alive. Artemis Pyle, also, one of the original members, pretty much original drummers of the band, continues to tour also with his band, the Artemis Pyle Band, honoring the music of Lynyrd Skynyrd. Both have local dates in the New York metro area, with Lynyrd Skynyrd playing June 10th here in Middletown, New York, at the historic Orange County Fair Speedway, in front of the stadium on the dirt track, which was very famous here in the 80s and 90s for doing shows like that. June 4th, they're also at Jones Beach, and June 11th, they're down in Allentown, PA. Artemis Pyle is also performing at the Rock Ribs and Ridges at the Sussex County Fairgrounds on June 25th, and at the Count Basie Theater in Red Bank, New Jersey, with the Outlaws on June 9th. So both bands are around. You can go out and see some Skynyrd and still keep the memory alive of this great band. Well, I guess we ought to just stop wasting time and get this thing started. We're going to go around to each member and ask their 3 favorite albums, like we said, and maybe I'm going to kick this off with Myles, and I want you to tell us your 3 favorite, and then we'll go around, and we'll just go around to each person once and maybe have a closing statement or something else. Myles, welcome.
Yeah, so Lynyrd Skynyrd, I think that if you grew up below the Mason-Dixon line, like Skynyrd is like ingrained in your DNA. Like for how long as I can remember, I've known about Lynyrd Skynyrd, since I was a kid, and pretty much like even today, what I notice is like even like the younger kids, they all know Skynyrd, they still like Skynyrd, and what's cool about Skynyrd to me is that they're like a bridge between the rockers and the country people. Like all the rockers down here love Skynyrd, and then all the country people, like all the people that I see in Nashville, even though it's not, my cup of tea, but all those people, they all cite Skynyrd as being one of their influences. And, they're just just an awesome band to me. For as long as I can remember, I've always liked them. And choosing 3 is pretty hard, but for number 3, I would go with the debut album, and this could easily be number 1. This is pretty much a greatest hits of Skynyrd, if you want to be completely honest. You have Give Me Three Steps that I probably know every word to that song. You got Simple Man. You got, I mean, if you don't know Free Bird, you've been living under a rock for I don't know how long. Tuesday's Gone, Poison Whiskey, freaking one of the best debuts to ever been put out. But I've heard this album so many times, and I just like some other ones a little bit better. So going for number 2, I'm gonna go with Second Helping. I really love that album. Don't Ask Me No Questions, Working for the MCA. Needle in a Spoon, Call Me the Breeze. Awesome. Only one song on there I would consider I don't like is Sweet Home Alabama.
You don't
And
like?
it's not that it's a bad song. It's just because it's pretty much the national anthem for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I'm
Okay.
LSU Tigers till I die. So yeah, no Sweet Home Alabama for me. But awesome album. I'm just playing around, but it's an awesome album as well. But my favorite has always been Nothing Fancy. It's always been my favorite, and basically because Saturday Night Special is on this record, my favorite Skynyrd song since the first time I heard it. The reason why I love this album so much is because I think that Ronnie Van Zant just sounds so cool on this record to me. Just his vocal delivery on here is just awesome. You got Cheating Woman, which is basically, My Baby Don't Love Me No More song. Railroad Song has been one of my favorite Skynyrd songs since I was a kid. Always loved it. And one of the most underrated Skynyrd songs, in my opinion, the radio doesn't play it enough, but the radio stations down here have finally been playing it a little bit, and that's On the Hunt. That's one of the most underrated Skynyrd songs to me. I love that song. So, yeah, picking 3 was pretty hard because Street Survivors and Give Me Back My Bullets is 2 freaking monster albums as well, but those are the 3 albums I would go with.
Excellent. I like how we got the Southern perspective from you tonight, because you were mixing in. We know how big college football is in the South United States, and you mixed that right in there when you didn't like that song. Like, well, how you not like that song? And you gave the reason why.
There's even plays where LSU has they sing Sweet Home Alabama, but they don't say Sweet Home Alabama. They say FU Alabama.
Oh, really? At the football games? Yeah,
because of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to move from sunny Louisiana, where, Myles has been known to throw down a few cans of beer and wrestle an alligator, which kind of fits with the Skynyrd thing. And I told him he should have a Skynyrd hat on tonight, but he doesn't. But we're going to go all the way up to the northwest of Canada and visit with our old friend, Denis Barthe, who's been a regular in the channel. And it's great to have you back on, Denis.
Hey, Steve. Hey, everybody. Nice to see everyone. Yeah, like I when you said you were doing an episode on Lynyrd Skynyrd, it's one of the bands that I don't need to do any research to talk about Skynyrd. I know their album in and out. And the story between me and Skynyrd is kind of an interesting one because after Aggression folded in like 88, 89, I got into I would call it like trouble. Just ran into a lot of trouble. Got myself in a bad situation, and my dad was living in Florida at the time, so I moved to Florida just to try to get my shit together. So I spent a lot of time in Fort Lauderdale and Gainesville.
Wow.
I wanted to still play music. I just came out of playing extreme trash, but I learned to play guitars with Ted Nugent and Joe Perry and Ace Frehley and those guys. So I had the rock and roll basis to be able to do that. So I actually joined a Lynyrd Skynyrd tribute band.
Did you?
Down south with there was one guy who used to play for Black Rose, I think the keyboard guy, and I think Bobby Dahl from Poison was in the band at the time as well. So I always loved Allman Brothers and Blackfoot and Molly Hatchet and Skynyrd and all that stuff. So, but I had to go to an audition and I had to learn a lot of Skynyrd slick and there was already two other guitar players. I needed to learn like the Steve Gaines part, which is like the most difficult parts to play to me anyway. Um, so that's like where like my love of Skinner started and all that. It kind of became like the music became kind of like food for my soul. So every time things goes to hell in my life, I always go back to Southern rock and listen to these, these classics. From an album perspective, very close to Myles. Like it's very hard for me to pick like three albums because each album have songs that I love so much. Um, but I'll go number three. I'll also go with the first album. I think Myles did a great description of every song on that album. Like they're classics, and I believe that the reason why this album is so good is because they already had quite a big body of music at that time. By the time they recorded their first album, they've been together for a few years, and they had the time to craft their music really well. And like Ricky Medlock's influence at first, and you look like to some of the original demos prior to the album, and there's so many like good songs and quality music that did not make it to the first album. So I thought like that's why like the first album is so strong, because they had a lot of times to like make it what it was. So that was three. Number two, I'll go with Nothing Fancy as well. Saturday Night Special, nicest guitar song and lick to play. It's so dirty, and you can almost like smell the South when you're playing that song. You can smell the feelings out there, and the barbecues and the beers and the pickup trucks and the freaking tailgating, right? So and I love Cheating Woman. I always loved that song because like I think like Myles described, sorry dude, I'm saying your name so many times, but
Oh, it's all good.
because the way that Ronnie sings it, it's like from his freaking inside. It's just coming from his inner shred. I don't know how to say it, but it's just well delivered musically, and it's so smooth. Um, and then my favorite album, and it's always been, and it's Street Survivors. And the reason why it is, I think like Skinner, that's that point, like with the addition of Steve Gaines, I think they become a different beast. Like it's almost like they were like about to become even bigger than there was, just because of the way that the songwriting and the guitar phrasing and the way that is like That Smell, like is my favorite like Skinner song. And it's just the soloing and the feel of the song. I Know a Little, like this is such a cool guitar song. Like, a lot of people don't even know that song. I don't even know why they don't know that song, but it's one of the cool lick to be able to play. And I do believe that Steve Gaines have injected new blood into Skinner. And it's so unfortunate that, he died, and Ronnie and all that, because I can only imagine what the next album would have become with that lineup being that strong rhythm section, amazing guitar player, Billy Powell, whatever he does. And so that's it. That's my choice. Skinner, amazing band. But like my favorite always been like Street Survivors. And it's just because of I felt they had like achieved a new level of songwriting.
Yeah.
And the music is so great. That's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
like I said, they were building such momentum, and of course, the plane crash came, and I can remember that day still, and what a dark day it was, for me, when that happened. I'm old. I was around back then, so anyhow, we're gonna move on over to Norway. The guy that stays up all night, I think he's a vampire. In fact, Chris Allo said that he will answer a text message at any time of the day. It doesn't matter if it's day or night here in the United States. So he may not sleep. Obie, welcome.
Thank you, sir. Well, I haven't been lived with Skinner all my life because I've lived in Norway. But I guess people older than me would know them much better than me. But I really came into them with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the remake movie. because they play that song in a van on the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In the beginning, in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning, huh?
Oh, the first one.
Hey, Obie, you're a little low on volume.
Little low.
If everyone else thinks so, I thought he was. Yeah. Try again, Obie.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that's how I got into them.
Now you're lower.
Lower.
Whoops. Did we lose Obie?
Oh.
He looks fine for me.
I can hear it.
Yeah.
You can hear him all right? Go ahead.
Yeah. So I got into them. I may have heard them earlier, but that was really when I just got, this is good. So I wanted to check them out more, and been listening to them ever since, and gotten all their albums and live official bootlegs and so forth. So I'm not gonna rattle the cage too much, because my number 3 is also the debut album, because it's I don't know what to say about it. That's not really said, but I could say my favorite tracks, and that's Poison Whiskey. I love that track. It's just the way it's sung, and it's great. And of course, Freebird and Things Going On. I really like that one.
Cool.
And for my second one, Nothing Fancy. I guess fits, since everybody else has been saying it's Nothing Fancy anymore. But I really like that song, I Am a Country Boy. I really like that song. And Cheating Woman, number 2, and Saturday Night Special. So I guess I don't need to say much more, or is there much more to say? I just like that. It feels like Nothing Fancy. It's more like a depressed, down, kind of swampy, kind of. It doesn't have that fire that the 2 first album has. It's more like real to the heart kind of song. It's kind of gut feeling, you know. It's not a party album. It's more like, this is who we are. Kind of difference from the 2 first albums. So, and for my first album, number 1 is the first album I got, and that's Give Me Back My Bullets.
Yes.
I love that album. And that title track is good.
Awesome.
And Crying for the Bad Man, I really like. Searching, it's also one of my favorites. So that's for me about Skynyrd.
Excellent. Excellent. And then we're going to move over to the rock star in the room tonight, Peter Pardo from the Sea of Tranquility and channel. It's always a pleasure to have Pete hopping over into my channel. I'm usually on his channel most every Monday, and I'm looking forward to an episode with you next week. He said he picked it out just for me. 1973, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Best albums of 73 will be our topic next week.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's pretty timely we're doing this, because I'm actually doing on Sea of Tranquility my top 30 Southern rock albums of all time countdown each and every day of the month. So I guarantee you Skynyrd's going to pop up on my countdown at least a couple of times.
I'd hope so.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting about this band? And I was just thinking about this while we've all been kind of talking and stuff. Have you ever met anybody, like, regardless of what type of music they really like, who doesn't like Lynyrd Skynyrd? It's like this band like appeals to everybody.
Never met one.
Right? Everybody.
I know 1 or 2.
I know a couple. Yeah.
They're crazy.
I mean, I know people who don't like rock music, who like, like
Yeah.
top 40 stuff and dance music like Skynyrd. I know people who are just serious metalheads and barely listen to anything else. They like Skynyrd. It seems like they're a band that kind of like transcends all age groups and all genres, which I think is really, really cool. But and I do want to say also that I'm sure none of us are going to pick any of them, but for those watching, don't sleep on the 90s and the 2000s.
They are good. They are good.
Because there are, they're not the drop dead classics like the 70s records are, but there's some really, really good music on albums like Endangered Species and 20 and Edge of Forever and Vicious Cycle. I mean, a lot of really great songs on a lot of those albums.
That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, this was kind of hard. My number 3 was tough because I was like, I had 2 of them. I was going to go for a tie, but I decided not to do that. So I'm going to go with Nothing Fancy for my number 3. Yeah, I mean, you guys hit on it already. It's great songs on here. Any album that's got Saturday Night Special and On the Hunt, which might be one of my top 2 or 3 favorite Skynyrd songs. Cheating Woman, Whiskey Rock and Roll. It's just a fun album. Obie was right. This is more of like, I think, kind of, this is who we are. We're comfortable in our own skin. Whereas the first 2 albums, I think, you know, a little, I don't know, little more them trying to figure things out. Great album. My number 3, the album that probably should have made them the biggest band on the planet, and they were probably heading in that direction before the plane crash. Street Survivors.
Yep.
A little bit more sophisticated, probably their best produced album, I think. Just some great anthems on here, man. And Steve Gaines just added an extra, you know, I kind of look at this as Steve Gaines coming into the band and giving him that little kick in the ass, kind of like what Mick Taylor did to the Rolling Stones a few years before, where he added that little bit of sophistication to the Stones. I think Steve did the same thing here. What's Your Name? That Smell, best Skynyrd song of all time. Amazing. One More Time is so cool and melancholy. I love that. I Know a Little. I mean, who doesn't like that song, right? Just kick ass and quirky. A lot of great songs on here. Oh, really, really good, well produced. And then my favorite's the first. I mean, it could be their greatest hits album, right? It's just got all their mega classics on it here. I still can listen to Freebird. I kind of tune out till the guitar solo kicks in. Then I'm listening because I still love the guitar solo. Poison Whiskey is amazing. Simple Man, another top favorite song of mine. Give Me 3 Steps. I Ain't the One. Killer. Tuesday's Gone. Great ballad. Just awesome, awesome album. So those are my top 3. But I do want to give a special shout out to the second album. That's my number 4. But if we were doing that, but there you have it.
You pulled a tie almost, which it's fine to do. Fine to do. We're going to move over to another Southern gentleman down here in North Carolina, Mr. Tony Dio, and see what he's got to say. Then we'll go up to see Matt, and then round out with me, and maybe we'll little chat, have a couple questions between ourselves before we wrap it up tonight.
Yeah, always great to be here, guys. Lynyrd Skynyrd, being from the South myself, you know, it's been kind of engraved in my brain for years. I remember, I don't really remember the plane crash happening. I was about 8 years old then, I guess, maybe 7, and I don't recall. I remember hearing something about it in years after that, because a friend of mine that was into more rock, I was all into Kiss and stuff, and he was turning me on to Nugent and ZZ Top and all kinds of stuff. And I remember he got gold and platinum, the double LP. And that was really when I really discovered Lynyrd Skynyrd at that time, because he was playing it all the time. And he's like, and my last name is Lynyrd. And he was always joke around and call me Lynyrd Skynyrd. He's like, you got to like this band, you know? So, for picking 3 albums, like everybody said, it's really tough to pick 3 albums from these guys. And like Pete said, I like a lot of the stuff that they did in the later years as well. But narrowing it down for this show to 3 albums, I'm gonna go number 3, Nothing Fancy, for sure. So many great songs on here. I love Whiskey Rock-a-Rolla, and Saturday Night Special, and Am I Losing's a great song. You know, I grew up on country music too when I was a little kid, so a lot of their country elements and stuff like Am I Losing, I mean, that's just a country song is what it is. And very well, you know, it's his finger picking guitar and he's singing along. It's just Ronnie had such deep lyrics, and he wrote from the heart. And but he was a true rock star for sure. But his feet were planted on the ground with no shoes on, exactly, you know, on stage. But my favorite song of all Lynyrd Skynyrd songs is On the Hunt, and that is on that album as well. I have some friends that play in a Lynyrd Skynyrd tribute band, and they weren't doing On the Hunt. And I'm like, why don't you guys play On the Hunt? It's the best song. They want to, but the keyboard player don't like it. I said, well, there's no keyboards in the song, Harley. Tell them to take a break or drink a beer or something. You guys should be playing that
Go to the
song.
bar and get a
Yeah.
beer.
So we'll go for number 2. We're going to go with Second Helping. Great album. Needle in the Spoon, great riff on that song. Love, Battle of Curtis Low, which you hear the story in that. I heard that song was kind of loosely based on Ricky Medlock's grandfather, Shorty Medlock, who would appear on the later Blackfoot albums and so forth. Love working for MCA. Great lyrics of that about them, getting signed and what the record man was telling them and stuff. And Don't Ask Me No More Questions, great song. And then of course you got your boogie song, Call Me the Breeze, one of the best songs ever. It's always got the cool little jam session when you see them play it live and so forth. I'm burnt out on Sweet Home Alabama. I mean, it's a great song, but I usually skip that one when I play the album usually. And number 1 album, definitely got to go with pronounced Lynyrd Skynyrd, the first album. Simple Man's probably one of the greatest songs ever written. I Ain't the One's great. Give Me 3 Steps. Tuesday's Gone. Just great stuff on here. Freebird, I love Freebird. I think that the ultimate version of Freebird is the live version from One More from the Road for sure. And I love the other couple of albums too that they did with the original lineup. And it's like what you said with Street Survivors. I mean, just imagine what the next step would have been if they had done another album after that. They just, that lineup, bringing Steve Gaines in, it definitely, upped the ante on what they were doing. I just wanted to mention, honorable mention was talking about the 90s albums and so forth. I think 20 is probably the best out of that whole bunch. And that's the first one they did with Ricky came in. And Ricky Medlock really added a lot to that band. And they had Huey Thomason from the Outlaws in at that period as well. And I worked at Sanctuary CMC for a while, like during that period and so forth, a little after that actually. But we did a bunch of those records and so forth. And they were always cool people to work with and so forth,
Cool. You also said you did some running, some
Yeah,
shows.
I worked shows as a runner for live shows. And I've worked with Skynyrd numerous times, I met Ricky Medlock back in the early 90s when he was still touring with Blackfoot. So every time I ever see him, he acts like he knows who I am, and he always comes up and speaks to me and all. Super cool guy. But yeah, I did some stuff for them, running some shows. Just one in particular that I could mention that was really such a huge memory of was the day after 9/11. We had a Lynyrd Skynyrd concert at the amphitheater here that I was supposed to work, and I showed up for work, and we weren't sure if they were going to do a show that day or not. I mean, they didn't give the go ahead for the riggers to start, bringing up lights and sound system and all. Yeah, so we kind of stood around for a few hours trying to figure out what they were going to do, and then the word got in from the band. The band had been off a few days, so the band decided they wanted to do the show, and they were going to donate the money to the Red Cross, profits to the Red Cross, and they wanted to do something to kind of give people some hope. Hey, that maybe we can move on, And it was a really surreal day, just dealing with everything. I remember they sent me out looking for some American flags to hang up, and there were none. I mean, everywhere you went, it was probably 2:00 in the afternoon, and everybody had been out that morning buying flags. And they were just gone everywhere we went. And I think we did find a couple. And Johnny Van Zant, he was I think he was in Atlanta or something. And they couldn't get a flight, so they had to drive him up and try to get him there in time. And because all the flights were canceled.
Sure.
And, I had to go to the town over, which was about 30 minutes away, and pick up Ricky Medlock. It was Michael, the drummer, Michael Caroloni, that was in the Damn Yankees, and the bassist at the time was Ian. His name was Ian, and he passed away, I think, a few years after that. And picked those guys up from the hotel, and we got stuck in traffic, and we're just talking, and they were telling road stories and had me laughing. It was really cool. But I think the thing that stands out in my mind so much about that show is when they played Freebird that night. Leon had recently passed away and stuff, and they just were showing they always had the screen to show the members that have passed on, from their, glory days and so forth, the early days. And they put Leon's picture up, And then they put American flag up, and I don't think there was a dry eye in the house. You know, it was just so heavy for what we had just gone through as a nation. And then here we are at a rock concert, and you know, it's just it did give everybody some hope that we could keep moving on. You know,
They were like the perfect band to play something around that time, you know, just because they're so patriotic and, you know, everything's American flag and USA. And
totally. They had that song Red, White, and Blue.
White and Blue,
It came out. Yeah. Another quick story. I had to pick them up one time. I picked up the band from the hotel, take them to the show at the arena in Raleigh, and Johnny and Ricky and everybody gets in the van. Well, Gary's wife, Dale, comes over to the van, and she said, "Are you going straight back to the venue from here?" And I told her, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she said, "Well, we're on a rental car, Gary and I, we're going to follow you back. We got to leave the rental car there." So they go back, and we pull into parking lot, and I go to pull into backstage area, and I look, and they're not behind me anymore. And I realized that they parked in the parking lot with the fans and were walking to the back gate, shoulder and shoulder with all the fans walking in. Nobody recognized them. They were just totally incognito.
That's
Gary had his
crazy.
hair pulled back, and they walked right in, and nobody noticed them. I just thought that was so crazy.
That's a great story.
Wow.
All right. And let's move over to Matt. His first time ever on the Rock Fantasy YouTube channel. Welcome, Matt. And let's hear what you've got to say about Skynyrd and your 3 favorite records.
Well, I gotta say, I've been a casual fan for years. I've heard a handful of their songs, and I really enjoyed them. Just recently, I actually started to become a more serious fan. I spent the past month or so getting into their classic stuff, and I actually really enjoy it quite a bit.
Okay.
Didn't have a whole lot of time to listen to their other stuff, but I am looking forward to that too. So my number 3 is going to be Street Survivors. You know, some highlights are What's Your Name? You Got That Right, Ain't No Good Life, and Sweet Little Missy. And the one thing I really like about this album, 2 of the songs I mentioned, they had Steve Gaines singing on them, and I actually love his voice a lot, and I wish they did more of that. And my only complaint about the album, I know That Smell is kind of a fan favorite. I feel like it could have been a little shorter. Yeah. And my number 2 is going to be Pronounced Lynyrd Skynyrd, and I almost had that in as number 1 because, like everybody's saying, it's like a greatest hits album.
Yeah.
You know. I mean, you can't really go wrong with I Ain't the One, Tuesday's Gone, Give Me 3 Steps, Simple Man, which is probably my favorite, and you can't really talk about Skynyrd without mentioning Freebird, especially when that solo kicks in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the solo alone is one of the most iconic things in rock history, and
All the drunk cages start chugging beer.
oh yeah, definitely.
Play Freebird, man.
Yeah, Freebird.
How many times you heard that shout?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And of course, my number 1. And I actually thought I was going to be the only one with this at number 1, but somebody else had mentioned it. Of course, it's Nothing Fancy.
Okay.
Which kind of surprised me because it has kind of a bluesy edge to it that I love very much. And of course, you know, Saturday Night Special, which is a fan favorite. Cheating Woman, On the Hunt, which I know a lot of you guys love.
Yep.
I actually love it too. And of course, one of my favorites is Whiskey Rock-a-Roller.
Cool.
I love that riff. the riff alone is really addictive.
Cool. It's nice to get the perspective from the younger generation too. He's the young kid on this episode. May I ask, how old are you, Matt?
I'm 16.
Yeah, we definitely got the younger, and you're just getting into the band, so it's kind of like it was great to hear that perspective. You know, from guys that like me, they're 61 and been listening to them since the 70s. You know, cool. And I guess it's my turn.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, the album that I bought first, bought it. There's a little department store that I could walk to down the hill from my house here called Playtogs. And I remember somebody's, back then there was no internet, no YouTube, anything like that. So you had to find from a friend's house or something to find out about a record. You had to hear about it from someone in school. And I went down there with a few bucks and I was looking for something new. And somebody said, "Hey man, you got to get the Lynyrd Skynyrd album, get something from Lynyrd Skynyrd." And One More from the Road had just come out. That was the first one I ever bought by them. It was the only album I had from quite a few years. So I had to mention that because that could be my favorite album, but we're not really doing live albums. But I'd probably listen to that record more than any of the studio albums over the years. I think
That's
it's a
my favorite as
masterpiece,
well.
and I love it. And there's one reason I wanted to mention it too, because Traveling Man's on it, and I love Traveling Man. I'm a little disappointed they took it out of the set list this year because that was in for years, and that's when Johnny would step back and Ronnie would come on the screen and sing that song. And man, I just thought that was special and wanted to mention that. And of course, I love all the versions of the songs, but my number 3 album for Dr. Death Studio is going to be Second Helping. My favorite song off that is probably The Needle and the Spoon, Call Me the Breeze, of course. And everyone's mentioned all these before. And I like Sweet Home Alabama a lot too. And The Southern Man Doesn't Need Neil Young around anyhow. I'm going to get in trouble. I can't talk more about that. But and of course, Myles, I don't have any side with that college football thing, so I don't dislike it because of that. So I'm going to know who you're rooting for next football season.
That's every football season.
Number 2, not too many people have mentioned this tonight. I think a couple have. Give Me Back My Bullets. I
Yes.
think that album is so strong. I thought it was going to be my number 1, but it really wasn't. But the title track, that could be my favorite Lynyrd Skynyrd song. It's just heavy, and I just love that song. Double Trouble, Searching. It's another great song that I'm into from that. I'm just picking 3. My number 1 has got to go with Pronounced, like almost everybody else. I think that was a mutual winner tonight. And I Ain't the One, Give Me 3 Steps. And of course, Freebird. If you listen to classic rock radio and that's what you listen to, and you don't really just listen to records and stuff like I do, of course, you're played out from that song. But I don't really get played out. I can always listen to that song. If I'm at a arena or something, I know it's the last song they're playing, and I want to beat the crowd out, I will leave. Sometimes I've seen Skynyrd a bunch of times in my life. First time I went back to see them, I was actually going to see a different band. It was me and Steve Levin that used to work at my store out in Wilkes-Barre. This is probably 20 years ago now. And we went there primarily because Deep Purple were playing. It was Deep Purple, Ted Nugent, and Lynyrd Skynyrd. And tell you the truth, we were disappointed in Deep Purple that night. It was the first time I had seen them since like Perfect Strangers. I mean, they were good still, but we didn't even know that was Ian Gillan at first. It's been so long, and he looked like somebody's grandpa on stage. And I mean, we were like, they were good. And Nugent was great that night too. But when Lynyrd Skynyrd came on, we didn't really go for Skynyrd. But we went, and man, everybody in the crowd, it's like an event, Skynyrd Nation. And they're still going strong. But that night, that won me back over. And even Levin, who wasn't a giant fan, was like, wow, they were the best band that night. A few years ago, I did the farewell tour. I did a meet and greet with them. I got to take a picture with the guys, and that was down at the PNC Art Center, of course. It was a farewell tour. I was never seeing Skynyrd again. I spent money on that, which I didn't think I was going to spend. Probably was a little fired up one night and was on the internet and said, yeah, fuck it, I'm buying that ticket. And once I got that ticket and looked at like, holy shit, I paid that much money to meet them. But it was fun. And then during the pandemic, I'm looking, well, I guess they're continuing the tour. They're doing the rest of the farewell tour, but now they're back on the road. Much like the Scorpions and much like many other bands that we could talk about that have done a farewell tour. as the who just played at Bethel Woods, and I saw their farewell tour in 1982. So
Yeah, me
we want to
too.
talk about farewell tours and guys sticking to it. It
The
doesn't really
longest
have much
farewell
with rock
tour
and
known to
roll,
man, right?
right? So got to see them a bunch over the years, and like any of the older bands, when I knew that they're on the last, Rush and all these other bands, I would just go every year because I figured sooner or later you're never going to be able to say, hey, I'm going to see Lynyrd Skynyrd again. I'm happy they're coming to my town next week on June 10th. If anyone's watching this show, it lives in the area, please come out and support this show at the fairgrounds. It's going to be a good time. The Marshall Tucker Band is opening up too, so you got a double Southern Rock Smackdown, and I believe there is a third band that's on this bill too, but I don't have that in front of me. But Obie had a good question before. What was your question? You were going to ask us what your favorite guitar
Yeah.
player was, or something to that. Maybe we'll just
Yeah.
do that with the last question and wrap this up tonight.
Yeah, there's been quite a few guitar players during the years, in and out and original. So if each could probably say their favorite guitar player and why. And start with you, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question because every guitarist who's been in the band is so good. And they're all so different from each other, right? So you got like Gary Rosington, who's a very melodic player with a lot of vibrato. He's kind of got this like Peter Green, Paul Kossoff thing going on. He's synonymous with the Lynyrd Skynyrd sound, those crying notes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they got him. You got Alan Collins, who is a little bit of a bluesier, fast picker player. You got Steve Gaines, who was jack of all trades, did the country thing, very technical player. You got, Mr. King, right? Who also another really good melodic player. You got Ricky Medlock. You've had Huey Thompson, all these great players. It's hard to say who my favorite was. I guess I got to give it to the guy who's been there from the beginning, Gary Rosington. He's just got that signature kind of weepy sound, which you always expect in Skynyrd, and I've always really appreciated him. He's not the flashiest guy who's ever been in the band, but he's the rock who's been in that band from day one, and I got to give it to him.
Cool. Sasquatch, I got a question for you. Maybe I'm going out of. What was the name of the Skynyrd tribute band you played in down in Florida?
I think it was called Lynyrd Skynyrd or something like that.
Lynyrd Skynyrd?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. If I remember correctly, it was called Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Tony, do you have an opinion on favorite guitarist?
I really like Alan Collins. It's like Pete said, it's really hard to pick. They've all got, something about them they brought to the band. I always just liked Alan Collins. I like to watch him. He was tall and lanky, and he always played like a Firebird or Explorer.
Yep.
And he was just such a wild man on stage at times. He was always rocking out. And when you see him at the end at Freebird and he's playing that solo, and he is just going ballistic on stage. And I feel like Ricky Medlock has always been a great guitar player in his own, even in Blackfoot. But I think when you see him playing at the end of end of Freebird, he's channeling,
100%.
He's got what Alan. He's feeling Alan because he's so wild on stage, just like Alan was. Very animated, just fun to watch.
I think it was known that Alan Collins was the guy in the band that was partying or using, I guess, the most.
Yeah, he was always the wild guy. I mean, even after the plane crash, I mean, he was in a really bad car accident, and was paralyzed and so forth. When they did the tribute tour in 1987, they'd bring him out on stage in a wheelchair, and I think he could move his arms, but that was about it. He was in really bad shape, and he tragically died a few years after that. I heard, I don't know if it's exactly how he died. I think they said something about his wheelchair fell off a lift or something, and he ended up something happened, and he got.
I think, and I think Peter will probably agree with me, but I think Alan Collins' phrasing sometimes reminds me of Ace Frehley, and the reason is because all those guys were fans of the band Free.
Yep.
Good point.
And
totally.
Free is always an appreciated band that when you listen to it, they influenced so many of those like American like 70s band like Aerosmith and all that. Um,
Very
the one thing I wanted to say about guitar playing, and I was always amazed that Ed King, who wrote like Sweet Home Alabama, used to be in Strawberry Alarm Clock and wrote like Incense and Peppermint, because like it's such a different like complete vibe. But it was crazy how he was able to adapt his style to like the music that Skinner was creating. And you know, and I'm same as Miles. Like, I mean, Sweet Home Alabama, I'm like I can't listen to it anymore. But when you listen to it, like, you know, like try to get yourself out of like you know, you overheard that song, like that little lick is so cool. And coming from a guy from Strawberry Alarm Clock is like, to me, it's just like, wow.
And a non-Southern guy, right? I think he was the first non-Southerner in the band.
Yeah.
I think he was living in North Carolina when they found him. When Ronnie called him, he said he was playing a little bar in North Carolina. I know he was living around here back in those days, but he played bass, I think, on the first album.
Yep. That's right. He also wrote Saturday Night Special.
And you have, you know, we were talking about, a lot of people are like, well, it's Lynyrd Skynyrd, but there's no original members. And, you know, Ricky Medlock is, you know, was with the band back in the day. And of course, Greg T. Walker from Blackfoot jammed with Skynyrd too.
Yeah.
I had the honor of hanging out with Greg T. one time at Brian's Barbecue, which was a venue around here, actually at his house party. And we were selling his shirts that day. And I was always a big fan of Blackfoot too. I used to go see them all the time. And I think we'd be maybe we ought to mention the Rosington Collins band too. And I probably should have put that in my dialogue earlier, because that they kind of mended that gap in between the Skynyrd reunion, and I got to see Rosington Collins quite a bit back in the day. Believe they may have opened for Black Sabbath. My memory's a little hazy on that. Maybe not. Maybe Music Mountain Pete was Rosington Collins too. I don't know.
Possible. I mean,
my memory's not as good as it used to be.
Sabbath had a lot of Southern rock bands opening for them in the early Dio days. You had Doc Holliday and Johnny Van Zandt open for them, so it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
I wanted to say when my turn, when I first went up, but Lynyrd Skynyrd is one of those bands that's been covered to death. Every band has pretty much covered them. But what I wanted to say was, one of my favorite songs is my favorite song is Saturday Night Special, and man, Armored Saint, freaking
great cover.
Man, that cover is so awesome. Like I find that it's so awesome just because not only is it my favorite Skynyrd song, but it's like the Armored Saint put their own twist on it, where it kind of doesn't sound the same, but it still has that element to it. But you know, John Bush kills it on that
song.
They
metaled it up.
Yeah, they metaled it up and it just I find like their twist on it was so good, and I just love that version of that song as well.
Good point.
And speaking of Skynyrd covers, I think Metallica did a version of Tuesday's Gone, which I like quite a bit.
Yes.
With Pepper Keenan and Gary Ross. Gary Roston's playing on it as well.
Shine Down done Simple Man, and I find that cover is pretty respectable as well.
COC did On the Hunt.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep.
Pete. Do you hear me, Pete?
Yes.
That song, there's a demo song, Was I Right or Wrong, on Second Helping, that Rosington wrote. And I just can't help to wonder why that song didn't end up on the album.
Good question. It's a good one.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
That song is so deep. If you listen to the lyrics, that's so deep. It's like, I can't believe that it didn't get on the album.
Yeah, very true.
Well, I guess we ought to wrap this up. And I would say Lynyrd Skynyrd is one of the bands I go to. It's one of my comfort bands, along with bands like Black Sabbath. So if people think that Keeler only listens to death metal, once again, they're wrong.
I'm the same way. No matter how heavy I get, black metal, death metal, whatever, I always got a place for Skynyrd, no matter what.
It's always a summertime thing too. It's one of those summertime bands that Pete talks about too. Like
Yep.
some of the classic rock. I was always more into the extreme stuff in the winter for some reason. In the summer, I go back to the Santana and the Skynyrd and, you know, the Allman Brothers and all that kind of stuff, you know. So anyhow, I hope everyone loved the episode tonight and us touching on some Southern rock on the channel, and mention your favorite Lynyrd Skynyrd albums in the comments and some of your Lynyrd Skynyrd moments. And we will be back on the next episode. We're going to be talking Alice in Chains. So we're switching it up a little bit. And if you're around Middletown, stop out to the Lynyrd Skynyrd show next week. You will most likely see me there. I will be there. And maybe you'll see some of the other folks from the rock fantasy scene there. I know all my employees, some of my employees are going. So have fun. We'll see you next time on the Rock Fantasy channel. Oh, Pete Pardo, what's going on your channel?
Well, if you're into this whole Southern rock thing, each and every day this month, I'm going to be counting down my favorite or top 30 Southern rock albums of all time, and I'm doing it backwards. So we just started. So starting with number 30, working my way down to number 1. So I'm sure you'll hear some Skynyrd on that list, some Molly Hatchet, some 38 Special, Allman Brothers, Blackfoot, you name them, they'll be on there. So join us each and every day on SOT for the Southern Rock Countdown.
All right. And we'll see Denis Barthe coming to New York City to play Armageddon.
Yeah, man. First show in 3 years. We've been rehearsing like for 3 fucking years for that show. So if we do one bad note, I would lose my shit.
Armageddon 7, June 17th and 18th in
Yeah.
Brooklyn. Totally switching
Yeah,
up the music. So some metal.
Okay,
All
we
right.
might play Freebird. You never know.
You
Like,
might play Freebird in honor of
why
the
not?
Rock Fantasy Files. All right. I'll see you guys next time.